Well, it's been a trilogy, and we've come to that final part now. It's sort of the last reel of the film. Geoff Allen has made it home. Hurrah! Geoff,
Hurrah!
welcome back.
Oh, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, wherever you are in the world.
We've all been following your adventures from France and Ireland, and now here. So I thought we'd catch up with you. And on a serious note, you did have all sorts of issues, to say the least, and not a happy bunny. You've passed those on. People were for you or against you, but that's the way it goes. Tell us, how's the last leg and what happened?
Okay, the last leg has been a great success, to be honest with you. Apart from what happened last Thursday, as you know, Paul, I've been quite supportive of MHKs, but I'm afraid that's starting to wear a bit thin. And in particular, I'd like to comment on something the Chief Minister did last week. In the Public Accounts Committee a week last Tuesday, and in Tynwald later that day, he announced that he would be announcing later in the week, Thursday or Friday, that there would be the new policy for repatriating residents, allowing them to, or some of them, to self-isolate in their own homes. And I think I've mentioned this in the last conversation. So what we're talking about, Paul, is we're not just talking about 300 or 400 residents here. We're talking about up to 1,200 people. These are the parents, grandparents, grandchildren, wives, husbands of the people who were away. And it was it was a bit like World War II, where last Thursday we all sat round the radio waiting for the Chief Minister to make the big announcement about us being able to repatriate. So we heard 10 or 15 minutes on how important it was that pilots with private pilots' licenses were allowed to fly their plane. Then we heard how important it was that they kept to keep their pilot's license. I mean, I don't know how many there are in the Isle of Man, but I don't think there's going to be that many. Then we heard that small craft owners can go for a little sail, and then we heard that bank holiday was going to be cancelled. And then finally, after about 20 minutes into the conference, we got to us, and he said, "Okay, repatriate residents, there'll be an announcement on Monday," and that was basically it. And I can't tell you how devastated we all felt at the big total deflation of our hopes and our dreams were just cast to one side by the Chief Minister. Now, okay, next Monday comes along, and this is where it starts to go really good. I get a phone call from a lovely girl in the repatriation committee. She went out of her way to help me. I got great advice about driving to Heysham, so I caught the ferry on Tuesday evening from Dublin to Holyhead, and then we drove up to Heysham next morning. The repatriation team at Heysham were brilliant. The nursing staff was brilliant. On board the Manana was brilliant. We all got home safe and sound. So that part of it was great, but it was tinged with sadness that there were still people going to the Comus Hotel, although some people had managed to find their own self-catering accommodation, so it was good for them, but they've still got to self-isolate. So that's where we were up to. But and I'm rabbiting on now, Paul. I'm sure you're going to interrupt me.
No, I mean, I'm listening to your story. It's interesting.
Well, I'll tell you the issue I've got, Paul. In Tynwald on Tuesday, June Watson tabled an amendment which meant that we could all go back and self-isolate in our own homes, even if there were existing members there. That got voted down in Tynwald, and 7 members of Tynwald voted against the amendment and voted the same way as the Council of Ministers did. Now, I listened to that debate, and I've read it in Hansard, and debate was quite clearly about the safety of the people in the houses that the returning residents would go into, and the extra pressure that might put on the health service. It had nothing to do with the spread of the infection into the community. It was purely down to safety of householders and pressure on the health service. Yet the people who voted against it, only 3 spoke, 4 didn't. I've written to every one of these 7 people, and I've had 3 responses, and it's obvious from those responses they to no regard whatsoever to what the debate was actually about, but it was all their own personal opinion and personal histories of how they'd been affected by the virus. Now, I always thought the job of a politician was to listen to both sides of the argument. That's why we elect them, don't we, to vote for us. They should listen to both sides of the argument, weigh up the facts, and then vote. I'm sorry, but in my humble opinion, that did not happen. And to get back to this self-isolation and not being able to go where there's a family member, the excuse we've got from the politicians is clinical advice. Now, the clinicians, and I'm not talking hypothetically, I know this for a fact, had no figures to refer to about, relating to the spread inside the house and then they're not into hospital. They had no figures. And do they honestly think that people like me, who've been away from their families for whatever it is, would willingly come home and go into a house where there is a high-risk relative, say with diabetes or high blood pressure or cancer? Do they really, really think that we would be stupid enough to put our families at risk when we hadn't seen them for whatever it is? It's madness. And I don't want to get political here, but the argument that we're saving the National Health Service is wearing thin, because at the moment, nobody, if you haven't got the COVID virus, or if you haven't had a heart attack, or if you haven't had a stroke, you can't avail yourself of the National Health Service. And I think that's a disgrace. So what pressure we could possibly put onto a hospital that's got nearly full of empty beds and nobody in intensive care, there's not even a casualty department there, how on earth could we be a threat to the National Health Service? Anyway, rant over, Mr. Moulton.
There's also been the points that some allegations anyway about a key worker or maybe more who have sort of come and gone almost as they wanted, and we don't want to get into that because that is only an allegation, but it must add to your case. There's one rule for one for another.
Rankles the word, Paul. That's a very valid point. And funny enough, I read in Tynwald, and I quoted the Chief Minister. I quote the Chief Minister, not verbatim, but what he said was, oh yes, all these people are banding around all these key worker exemptions, 400, 500, but I can assure you the majority of them are delivering oxygen. Well, I tell you what, Chief Minister, here's a direct request here. Instead of accusing people of banding around figures, why don't you come out and tell us all exactly, and you know the figures because the Cabinet Office keep them, you come out and tell us all exactly how many key workers are coming to the Isle of Man and going into a house and self-isolating with members of their family. And if he did that, that would kill the argument stone dead, wouldn't it? It would either prove him wrong or it would prove him right.
And we've asked those sort of questions, but we don't get answers, as you know.
No, we don't get answers. And we don't get answers of what the clinicians' advice is either. All we ever get is, and I've had this from David Ascott, God love him, and I think the man's a star, I'll be honest with you. But all I ever get from him is the clinicians this, clinicians that, clinicians the other. And Paul, I don't want to get political here, but I've got to ask this question. Who's running the Isle of Man at the moment? Are the clinicians running the Isle of Man, or are the politicians running the Isle of Man? Because every time you question anything that a politician says or does, all you ever get is the clinicians' advisors. Well, that's wearing too thin as far as I'm concerned. And I'll give you that. Let me give you an example of why I think it's wearing thin. 2,500 workers last month, construction workers, and let's be honest, construction workers, you know, are real men of the world, aren't they? And you can work together, 2,500 of you, as long as you stay 2 meters away from each other. Yeah, if you and me wanted to go for a game of golf together, we're not allowed to. We're only allowed to go and play golf if we're on our own.
Or from the same household, I think that's coming, isn't it?
Well, if it's, no, that's already, if you're in the same household, you can play golf now, but at the moment, you can only play on your own. Now, there we go. 2,500 construction workers can go on a building site, but you and me can't go for a game of golf.
Okay, well, our question Q&A with the government is going to be reduced. We're having two pools as from next week, an A and a B pool. I'm doing Monday and Fridays, and we're not going to have one at all on Tuesday. But they are talking about having one for the general public, and I've been very keen on that idea. So I'm definitely putting you up for a question when you get a chance, right? You want to ask that?
Yeah. How long have I got, Bob?
And the other thing is, you sure don't want to be a politician? You seem to.
No. Listen, look. Let me say this again. I've got the greatest sympathy in the world for politicians. They've had a difficult time, but come on, this is and one. I'll tell you what. One MLC said in Tynwald on Tuesday, "Oh, this is only for 14 days," and she knows who she is. This is only for 14 days. Why are we splitting hairs? Well, let me tell you, madam, this is not 14 days. This has been going on now for 2 months. Not 14 days, 2 months. The 14 days only starts when you walk through the doors of the Cobus Hotel. And the way it's going, and I'm told we're looking up towards the end of June now for travel dates, we're going to be looking at another 2 months. And that's why I think some politicians have got no idea of what is really going on. Anyway.
To finish with, it's good to be back, right?
It's great to be back, and I'm lucky. I can't tell you how lucky we've been. I mean, this is not all about me. We've been so lucky. We've had a lovely welcome from our family and from our friends. I'm lucky where I live, Paul. I'm able to put a big rope across my boundary. And of course, there's a private road on the other side next to my boundary. So I put my 2-metre isolation boundary rope and my bucket for deliveries. I've had people collecting prescriptions for me. I've had people drop samples to the vets.
Okay, we get the picture. You're self-isolating very well. Now listen, before you go, I've got already someone booked for the review of the month for May, but I think I'm going to ask you to look back on things by the end of June. So we'll still keep you in the loop because you're obviously very popular. Is that all right? You can keep your eye on the ball and give us your take on things.
I'd love to, Paul. I'll be honest with you. Anything I can do to help people like me, I'm more. And do you know what? Let me say, I'm going to say this. Thank you, Manx Telecom, for allowing me the platform, and I've not been prompted to say this.
No.
It can't be easy for Manx Telecom because I'm saying things which probably aren't too popular within government. Thank you to Manx Telecom for giving us the platform to give our side of the story, and thank you for your middle of the road, independent stance. And I'm going to shut up now.
Thank you, Geoff. That's very kind of you.
If I can.
We'll see you at the end of June, if not before.
I hope so, Paul. I really hope so. Thank you so much. And no, I'm not going to tell everybody how old you just told me you are.
I'm a pensioner. Well, whatever you call that. 60. Yeah, I don't care. Thank you, Geoff. See you soon.
All the best, mate. Cheers.